Alright everyone, rules for thee but not for me. The rich snobby elites really hate it when you point out their hypocrisy. John Kerry, hypocrite number one. He used to be Al Gore, but I think John Kerry at this point has managed to eclipse him. Getting a totally fair question the other day, he was asked, what do you think your carbon footprint is? Because he's traveling on private jets and in limos. He's constantly traveling the world to talk about the need to reduce carbon emissions mainly, which people find ironic. It's sort of like Michael Moore rambling about climate change, and his house, I think, has 14 bedrooms, if I remember correctly. Al Gore with his jet setting and so forth. The rich elites that talk a big game about saving the world from becoming the real-life Tatooine because we fucked up and bought too many SUVs and shit are the ones that drive gas guzzlers. They're the ones that eat expensive imported meats and things like that. They'd definitely be buying the Wagyu if they were shopping at Anton's, which they should. Maybe they'd grow a brain. And they're protein deficient maybe. There's something wrong with them. NIMBYism. Total NIMBYism. If I were to try to build a solar farm or a windmill field next to Michael Moore's mansion, he would bitch about it. If I tried to locate, it's sort of like talking about like homeless shelters and migrant shelters and stuff. Where do they locate them? Are they in Martha's Vineyard? No, they're in Chicago. And they ain't in the part of Chicago where people have private security and penthouses and shit like that. No, they'll locate them out in the ghetto somewhere with the working class or the poor. That's always how it happens. John Kerry is the very essence of this kind of thing. And by the way, I've pointed out before, especially white liberal NIMBYists get under my skin more than anybody else in the world. I would sooner have neighbors that were a little bit terroristy or something like that than to have them as neighbors. Coming over every week to bitch about the length of your lawn and, the state of your garden and shit like that. I wouldn't be able to stand it. There's a reason I wouldn't move to the burbs where that sort of mentality is common. Though you do see it in rural areas too. I would note that when they want to put up windmills, it's the rich communities bitch about it. It's always the next mountain over where you're supposed to put the windmills, even though you could feasibly make quite a bit of electricity with those in a climate like ours. A lot of wind. Constant wind. Yeah, you put them in the rich neighborhoods in the nice part of Burlington, you'd get a lot of electricity, but wait until the bitching begins at the next city hall meeting. John Kerry does this on steroids. Whereas the soccer mom Karen NIMBY liberal will bitch about your lawn ornaments being facing the wrong way. John Kerry will bitch about the fact that you just ate a hamburger. Meanwhile, he's going home to filet mignon. He will bitch about you, taking your vacation and flying, yet he's constantly flying around from place to place on a private jet. It's NIMBYism. Your leaders are not walking the walk. So-called leaders, not real leadership, more tyranny, but they don't walk the walk. That's because they don't actually take this concept seriously. John Kerry does not believe climate change is a threat to the world. He looks at it as an opportunity to make money. He realizes that it's largely not man-made anyway, and it wouldn't matter regardless because there's nothing we're feasibly going to do about it. Human industry will continue. You're looking at like a dystopian situation where 99% of the population sleep in a pod and eat soylent, and then you have these vast rich areas cordoned off, of course, by private security, where people have mansions and they eat their beef and things like that. John Kerry represents that sort of Klaus Schwabism mentality. He's not going to eat the fucking bug burger, not unless it's for a photo op. Just like he's going to talk a big game about, well, we need to do something about this fentanyl crisis. Well, the addiction rehab center is not going to be anywhere near him. Any of his number of homes, I think he's probably got 3 or 4 of them. It's like the Obamas, also NIMBYists. I like it when liberals try to claim, well, they're so likable. Yeah, that's why they, again, bitch about your carbon footprint. They don't want to discuss theirs, just like Mr. Kerry doesn't. And their Martha's Vineyard mansion is a couple feet above sea level, a handful of yards away from the water. Well, according to the climate alarmists, they should be underwater fairly soon. Shouldn't take very long at all. High tide should be right up in their living room floor. Why did they choose to buy that particular property? It's inexplicable. By the way, they already had a decent home in D.C. Why don't they just fucking stay there with the rest of the scumbag politicians? Everyone wishes that John Kerry would just stay in D.C. or some other singular location and not bother everybody else. But for him to flip out in anger, literal anger, like the description archived, of course, at simply being asked if he knows what his carbon footprint is laughable. His footprint's probably 1,000 times higher than the average citizen. But he's going to teach you about what you can do to help the environment. It's not picking up trash. It's not composting. It's not gardening. It's not using terra preta, which is the only working method of sequestering carbon for long periods of time, I would add. They never talk about terra preta, even though it's useful. That's because if people grew more backyard gardening shit, if they were doing their own like charcoal kiln operations and shit, they'd have to go to the store less. They'd be able to start their own seed lines with heirloom seeds and shit like that, and have inexhaustible charcoal with a rotary cutting a little wood forest area. You know, you'd have it collectivized within the neighborhood, or some people with enough property can do it themselves, and they'd be more self-sufficient. Well, where's the money in that? And it would actually be helpful. Yeah, you realize how much carbon I probably sequestered in my garden by doing the terra preta thing some time ago? It's a lot of CO2, that's for sure. You know, solids are a little bit more dense than gases, so just saying. It definitely helps growth. That herb bed, by the way, still black and gritty. It looks like coffee grounds. Perfect soil. My basil's going to be goddamn huge. But when I grow my own basil, John Kerry is not getting tax money off of it. Because then I can take the basil seed, and next year I don't have to buy the seeds. If I'm using terra preta, I barely have to buy any fertilizer beyond maybe making my own compost. I can do that by goddamn raking leaves and piling up grass clippings. Again, there's no money in it for John Kerry. John Kerry will say, well, travel less. And meanwhile, he's making that tweet about people needing to travel less from his goddamn private plane. It's NIMBYism. Rules for thee, not for me. It's hypocrisy. Manifest from John Kerry. Probably the #1 example of it. I mean, somebody should put his image on Wikipedia on the page for hypocrisy. It'd be fitting. Hell, even the administrators there might not be able to find a valid reason to take it down because it's so goddamn fitting. That's about all. Peace out.